Hello and welcome to Real Talk Friends. We are so grateful that you have joined us. We are thrilled. It feels like Christmas.
I know, we say thrilled because I don't have an adjective to describe how excited I am to have Stephen with us today.
Yeah, we started this season saying if we do nothing else this season, we need to have a conversation with you. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
You've given a lot of conversations and shared a lot of content and inspiration around some of the things we're going to talk about today. But we had a prayer before we started that we're going to maybe approach things in a way that answer more prayers and help facilitate faith in an honest way. So I'm going to give a little intro. You correct me if I say anything wrong. Stephen Harper had the opportunity to serve a mission in Winnipeg, Canada, which is code for cold, right?
Very cold.
Earned a degree in history from BYU in 1994. So you're a little bit older than me, only by a thread.
Thanks for reminding me.
Hey, listen, I'm older than him, so I'm grateful that we were closer in the range. Yeah. While you were a student there, you worked as an editorial assistant at the BYU Studies, which is going to come full circle, right?
Yep.
And then you earned an MA in American History from Utah State University and a PhD in early American history. Am I saying this right? Lehigh University?
Lehigh University.
But not spelled like the Book of Mormon prophet.
No, L-E-H-I-G-H. It's in Pennsylvania. It's a wonderful place. It was perfect landing place for me. And I don't know where the name comes from, but it's not a Book of Mormon.
I love that. You are teaching currently church history and religion, but you also had a stint at BYU Hawaii. And Scott and I admitted that we're a little disappointed that it was only for a year.
Yeah, two academic years, not 2 total years even, just a year, and it was really, really great.
It is really great.
Hard place to leave.
Yeah, Oahu North Shore is like no other place, right?
Yeah, and the university, BYU Hawaii is a special place.
Yeah.
Great.
And now we're lucky because you've been at BYU Provo since, is it 2002?
Yeah, almost 20 years.
And you've worked on the Joseph Smith Papers and the Saints Project, which I think is fairly notable, and I hope we kind of dive into that a little deeper because I think collectively as a work, it has been such a gift to members of the church to have...
That's what we hoped.
Right? Yeah. The curtain pulled back. Yeah. I think that with a non-apologetic narrative about our history, and we want to dive into that a little bit. But you are now working at the BYU Studies Quarterly as the editor-in-chief, but you said that doesn't say much about what you're doing.
Well, I think of my job as the cheerleader-in-chief. The smart people who do all the editing are smarter than me, and I'm grateful that they handle the technical editing parts of it and building the journal. We publish it 4 times a year, and it's really great if your viewers and listeners don't know it. It's an excellent source of knowledge. It's scholarship that's informed by the restored gospel of Jesus Christ. So the cutting edge articles on what we know about Mother in Heaven, race and priesthood, etc., are all in BYU Studies.
I love that. And do you want to plug your family and the support of what does the Stephen Harper family look like?
Well, my wife and I, my wife's Jennifer Sebring, and we like a meme that says, whatever else, at least we don't have ugly children. So that's how we console ourselves.
I was not expecting that at all. Stephen, that's hilarious.
So that's probably all I better say.
You have beautiful children.
That.
How many non-ugly children do you have?
We have 5 beautiful children, and 5 total. And a wonderful son-in-law.
That's good.
I was waiting for it.
Clarify that you don't have one
and
ugly.
2 other or whatever.
Yeah.
And you have a married.
Well, 2 married. Wonderful son-in-law and a wonderful daughter-in-law.
Okay, wonderful.
Scott and Paige.
Okay, that's crazy. Them. Scott is married to Paige.
Yeah, my wife's name is Paige.
How about that?
Yeah,
what are the
I was
chances?
like, wait, what? What just happened? Are we related all of a sudden? I'm like, no, I'm just kidding.
Okay, in all the prep, I love this self-described characteristic that you have. I think it's on your website. I am an introvert with an advocate personality.
Yeah.
I think that's so brilliant. There's a sense that if you do public work or that there's content about you out in the world that somehow you're an extrovert and you want to be out there, but you would describe yourself more as an introvert.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And anybody who knows me very well would say the same thing. The advocate personality part is what makes me, it's why I'm here today.
To push past.
Right. I advocate the restored gospel of Jesus Christ every possible chance I get. And otherwise I would prefer to be behind the scenes and out of the public eye and just doing something quiet.
Well, I'm thrilled for this conversation that we're about to have, and we're going to dive into it. Do we want to talk about our why and hope for this?
Yeah, so let me go. This is basically kind of where we're going to go around, and who knows, it may end up in different directions, and we're fine with that. But basically, we wrote down to identify common misconceptions about difficult church history and doctrine, and then to understand how to better approach these topics with faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. And because our show is faith in the restoration of the gospel of Jesus Christ, of course, we want to take history in that direction, which of course is what you study. And so, Stephen, I'm going to go right into like nerd teacher mode, which is, nice. I am fascinated to see, like, what are some of the things you do as you teach church history and doctrine? What are some of the things that you want your students to know at the beginning of a semester that kind of build a foundation or a framework so that as you teach church history and doctrine, you have some of these common principles to rely on that feed their education and their spiritual experiences?
That's a great question. We actually start with philosophy, a little bit of philosophy. I introduce them, if they haven't already become familiar with it, to the concept of epistemology. So the philosophy of knowing. What do they know and how do they know it? And I really try to push them on this point. What is it that you know about God, the nature of God, Christ, first vision, whatever else, right? Anything that we're going to study. What do we know? How can we know? And I want them to revisit that or think metacognitively. I want them to be aware of their thoughts about these things before they continue thinking maybe along lines that are not fruitful or that are going to run into dead ends or that are going to be disrupted, right? In the information age especially, we're going to be disrupted in what we think we know about church history and doctrine. No matter who we are, we're likely to find out something tomorrow that's disruptive to what we knew today or thought we did. And I want them to be aware that that's going to happen. I want them to take that for granted. I want that to be their expectation. And so we start with some philosophical work. We talk about different ways of knowing. There are lots of legitimate ways of knowing. But in a gospel sense, there's a recipe for knowing that involves hard intellectual work, seeking, learning out of the best books, but also hard spiritual work at the same time, seeking by faith, being prayerful, being open to the idea that there's revelation from God. So I very much want to help them be seekers, as Doctrine and Covenants section 88 puts it, in this particularly Latter-day Saint way of aggressively pursuing the truth. I hope that's at least part of an answer.
No, and I appreciate that, because I was going to ask, and I don't know if you can think of one right off the top of your head, but has there been, you say, this open idea that you will encounter things that might redefine or even contradict what you previously thought before. Do you have an example from your own life where that was the case, where you kind of were on one path and then you read something or learned something, you're like, whoa, I kind of missed out on that one?
That was literally the question I was just going to ask.
I thought I'd steal it from you.
No, the spirit is like, bam, 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 bam.
The most vivid one for me, the most formative one, I could tell you funnier or sillier ones or self-incriminating ones. Maybe we could do that if things go badly here. But the first one that comes to my mind is when I was 14 years old. I was sitting at the breakfast table. My father was sitting next to me. And I happened to look at a copy of the Church News. It's from May 15th, 1985.
I know exactly where you're going.
Yeah. It had in it an article that tried to contextualize a letter. And the letter was printed also in the Church News. This letter was purportedly from Joseph Smith to Josiah Stoll, and it told him how to find the right kind of hazel branch, how to cut it in the right way, lay it in just the right way, so that it would lead him to buried treasure. And the letter said that these kinds of treasures are guarded by clever spirits, and you have to appease the treasure spirits. And so I read this, and it was odd to me, really odd, right? And I was not an avid reader of the Church News or anything about the church. I just assumed everything about church, right? I assumed the church was true. I assumed Book of Mormon was true. I didn't have any metacognitive awareness of what I knew and how I knew it. So reading that letter was jarring to me. It was disruptive. It introduced ideas that were completely foreign to what I thought I was sure about. So I asked my dad, why aren't they teaching me this? Something like that. And he did a great thing. He didn't say, you're dumb for thinking that. He didn't say, just don't worry about it. He said, man, I don't know. He had just read it before me. He was puzzled, completely puzzled. It was new to him. So he was open. He was disrupted too. And he showed me how to be disrupted. He didn't freak out. He didn't melt down. He didn't resign from the church. He said, I don't know. I don't know that. And then he said, what I know is the Book of Mormon is true. And he taught me how he knew the Book of Mormon is true. And it had come by long experience and by the power of the Holy Ghost. And he made me a promise. He said, if you will keep working on this, if you'll keep looking for answers and keep your faith, you will find that this will all work out. And it did all work out. As you know, that was a forged letter. It wasn't authentic. There is a context for it. There's actually a really interesting reason why that letter would be written, forged the way it was, and make the claims it did. And I've since learned all those things, right? Now that whole episode it fits for me. Everything about it makes sense. And if I had not identified the assumptions I was making, or had my dad help me, and if I had not started to interrogate what I thought I knew and how I know it, then I would have come to a different conclusion. But I'm grateful that my dad set me on a course to examine everything about the gospel, everything about everything important, by saying, what do I really know and how do I know it? In this current climate we're in, where claims are being made about the efficacy of this or that, or everybody seems to know everything. And I'm sitting back thinking, I have no idea. I don't know. I don't know if this claim is right or that claim, and I don't claim the expertise to know. And I wish everybody would stop pretending to know things they don't know.
To speak in absolute.
Yeah, just be like my dad. I don't know, but I know the Book of Mormon is true. I've based my life on it, and that life the fruits of that have proven to be borne out.
Yeah.
And that's what he knew. He didn't go beyond what he knew. He didn't tell me a bunch of stuff to try to make the medicine go down or make it all work. That's worse. A bad answer to a good, solid, hard question is worse than no answer. And I learned that from him. I'm grateful for that. And then that's the best one. That's the most formative one. My life is built on that experience of realizing I don't know near as much as I thought I did. And so what do I really know? And then banking on the tiny amount that I really know and seeking relentlessly for more light, more knowledge along the way.
Well, I will say I am so appreciative that your father responded that way,
Me
because
too.
I can feel our audience, and that's not always the experience.
Sadly.
And like you said, when we take an honest question and we don't make room for the wrestle, we push, I think currently right now it would be ex-Mormon TikTok, and those become your sources for answers. And I would also just say that I'm so grateful because it was the seed of creating this great scholar that is a gift to us, that you were the Lord. I don't think it's a coincidence that you were 14, 15 years old, right? You were informed at an early age that there was space for that. And I think that's really been the backdrop of how you've approached all the projects and work you do.
I think so. It really has helped me through every other thing. Everything that's come along later, I've been able to respond to in the same way. Well, I don't know. I don't know about plural marriage. I don't know about first vision accounts. I don't know about Book of Abraham. I don't know about treasure seeking. So I'm going to find out. I'm going to read everything there is to know about it. I'm going to not pretend to know things I don't. I'm going to keep seeking and holding on to the things I do know, and I will see that this will all work out. My dad was right. He's been right over and over and over.
So we're going to get specific, because
Great.
I would like to take that into more detail. And we want to kind of do maybe a rapid fire round on a few of those.
Wow, okay.
Really, it won't be very rapid. Let's just be honest.
We don't do anything rapid.
No. We want to make sure the Spirit directs this. So we're going to start with Word of Wisdom. Mm-hmm. You have a book out about it. And I could give you lots of examples where maybe that becomes the thing that shows up on the path, mm-hmm. and it derails someone's process. I think one right now that I'm hearing a lot from viewers is that Joseph Smith partook of wine the day he was in Carthage, mm-hmm. right? And so the end of his life, and then we even discussed, I think, on the show that it didn't become a policy per se. It was a suggestion for a while, and then it turned into what it is today. I just want to leave it open. What are your thoughts on Word of Wisdom and what you found in your study that could probably help with that derailing process and pull people back?
Okay, so this is like a 5-hour show, right?
Yes.
Okay.
As long as you want to go.
Well, the first thing is to notice that the assumption in the comment you made, right? Something's wrong because Joseph Smith, according to his history, took wine in the jail on the day he died. Right. So that, what we would want to do, first of all, is know if that's a fact or not. Is that true, that his history says he drank wine in the jail the day he died? Yes, it is. Then once we know the facts, we want to figure out what the facts mean, right? So it would be a hasty thing to jump to the conclusion, Joseph Smith did not obey the Word of Wisdom. If he were here, and we said, Joseph, your history says you drank wine the day you were murdered. Is that right? Yeah. So you didn't obey the Word of Wisdom. He'd say, how'd you get there? Well, I know what the Word of Wisdom says and you didn't obey it. He'd say, well, I know what the Word of Wisdom says. I received it in February 1833. I don't know what you're talking about. And he would have a different sense of the meaning of the Word of Wisdom than we do. There's a lot of water under the bridge into the 21st century. And the Word of Wisdom has a long history. And he received it not as a commandment, but as the Lord's wisdom. If you're really wise, you're going to behave in these ways about your soul. Your spirit and your body is your soul. Your body's important. Take really good care of it. These are some substances that won't lead to health or happiness. These are some things that will lead to increased health and happiness. Now be wise. And there's a principle with the promise. If you'll behave in those ways, you'll have greater wisdom and knowledge. You'll have access to spiritual treasures that you don't get otherwise. Mm-hmm. That's the Word of Wisdom in a nutshell. And Joseph knew it well. He understood it well. He took a pretty moderate stance toward it. So, for example, he had a beer. Moss's grocery store, his journal says. A beer meaning a barley drink with a very low percent of alcohol in it, which he would be completely aware. The Word of Wisdom says that's perfectly good, right? We're not, right? If you said that to a gospel doctrine class today and you said, if Joseph had a glass of beer at Moss's grocery store, according to his journal, would that be against the Word of Wisdom? Of course, because beer is against the Word of Wisdom. But he would think of it in terms of, did you read what it says about barley? And what barley's for, and how to make a mild barley drink. And similarly with wine, right? Wine was for sacrament. The Word of Wisdom says distilled stuff, don't ingest that. It won't do you any good. Fermented stuff, you can use that for sacrament. Make it yourself. And they did that. The church did that for a long time, up into the 20th century. Mm-hmm. So, in other words, lots of people make assumptions. I have done this for a good chunk of my life. I grew up making the assumption that my next door neighbors were going straight to hell because although they were wonderful people, they smoked cigarettes. Mm-hmm. And all I knew from the sophisticated or unsophisticated Word of Wisdom understanding I had was, don't smoke cigarettes. That's bad. So I assumed all kinds of things, right? Smoking cigarettes is a sin. Etc. Smoking cigarettes makes you displeasing to God, right? I projected lots of meaning onto the fact that my neighbor smoked and I had been taught that smoking was bad. And I was wrong. The meaning that I came up with, the assumptions I was making were wrong. These were wonderful people. Smoking's not a sin. Mm-hmm. Smoking's not good for your body. That's what the Lord has taught us, right? I'm going to save you some trouble by forewarning you, smoking is not good for your body. That's what the word of wisdom says.
So I have an amen in my soul, but I want to just follow it up before we go to the next topic. I feel the question in people's hearts a little bit of, so what is the motivation today to follow a policy that is maybe temple recommend dependent, or what can you comment on that before we jump into the next?
Help me understand the question. Why obey the word of wisdom today?
Yeah, that was a very general way of saying you can take it any...
Maybe as it's presently constituted.
Correct.
Yeah, and as part of that, maybe I'm projecting here onto you, but I'll say it in my own words. The word of wisdom is far from a complete, right? There are things that it doesn't say that are bad for us that we shouldn't do. There are things that we might question based on the current state of understanding. So given all that, why would we obey it? Is that what you're saying?
Well, and I think too, there's certain interpretation of policy and handbook, and then there's also sometimes a response by church leadership. If someone is sitting across the desk, say, hey, I just listened to this interview, and this is what I feel compelled to do. And I'm not saying those nuanced conversations can't happen, but if you could just comment on, I give the example that during Moses' time, bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwiches were the worst thing you could do. But polygamy and wine was like full send, right? And now today we're like, no big deal unless you're in the Middle East and you're a member of the church there. It's hard to find a certain kind of bacon, right?
Yeah.
I didn't know there were so many types of bacon, right? But other things like polygamy and wine right now is a policy that we follow in a different way. That's kind of the direction I'm
Okay, great. I understand now. Sorry, I'm slow on that.
No.
But
You're fine.
I have two answers to this question. One is a spiritual answer, and the other one is a sociology of religion answer. So the most important one first, the reason to obey the word of wisdom is because it's a principle with a promise. It's an if-then. And the promise is if you follow this wisdom, you'll have great treasures of knowledge, hidden treasures. In other words, it's one of those many things in the gospel that says, unless you behave in this way, there are things you cannot know. Wow. There's knowledge that's only acquired by choosing of our own free will to behave in a particular way. And the people who don't do that never know. They can scorn at it, right, from the spacious building, saying what an idiot you are, and they'll never know what can be known by those who choose to obey. So the word of wisdom is one of those things where there are hidden treasures of knowledge available for obedience. I testify of them. I know that they're real and that they exist. I've tried to live the word of wisdom my whole life. I was miraculously healed in the early 90s. I think in part because I had been obedient to the word of wisdom. I'd been given a patriarchal blessing that made that promise, and I believe in it very much. I have a kind of knowledge that comes from that I would not have if I had not tried to obey the word of wisdom. Now, I should say that I am a frequent violator of the sparingly clause of the word of wisdom, depending on how it's construed.
And all.
Yeah. One of my students just made a terrific insight, though, that I won't go into here, that is making me feel a little better about that. But the sociology of religion answer is, in religions of all kinds, there is boundary maintenance that's done by rules or policies. And one of the ways that Latter-day Saints have done that is to ramp up the word of wisdom as plural marriage and other things waned, right? Plural marriage was the thing that made us distinctive for half a century. Nobody else was quite like that, at least not in our neck of the woods. And it made us completely other.
Peculiar.
Yeah. So you had to, in other words, this means that if you're going to be part of that religion, you really invest, right? It's costly to be a Latter-day Saint in the 19th century. It's always been costly to be a Latter-day Saint. And sociologists of religion know that that the most healthy religions, the ones that do best, that thrive most, are costly but not too costly.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's a kind of a perfect threshold. Well, notice that
a little out of your comfort zone, but not enough to destroy you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and notice that then word of wisdom functions very much as one of the sort of arbiters of that for us. In other words, I'm saying it sort of is arbitrary. and that's not a problem. That's actually, it will move in part based on how the culture moves. And so, an easier way to see this is the BYU dress and grooming standard, right? That is not a hard, fast law. That's a countercultural stance, and it will shift in relationship to how the culture shifts, and it makes being a member of that group costly, right? It makes a higher threshold. Well, the word of wisdom in terms of sociology of religion functions in the same way.
I love that.
That is so fascinating to look at it and break it up into those different ways. Thank you. So as we move in, let's go in. You mentioned plural marriage and polygamy and as we move in, and this is one of the reasons we had you on at this point, is because we're kind of getting into some difficult to understand aspects of the restoration of the gospel from now until December in our Come Follow Me study. Word of Wisdom, we that was section 89 was a few weeks back. And so as we move into plural marriage, let me start with this. What are some common misconceptions that either you've had or you've seen that we could get like up front out of the way and say, first of all, maybe be careful with these things?
Yeah. Well, it used to be a lot more common than it is today to assume that in order to be exalted, you had to participate in plural marriage. That's not the case. That's not the case. The new and everlasting covenant of marriage is for almost everybody who's been involved in it, monogamous. That's the rule. Occasionally in history, there have been exceptions to that rule that the Lord has revealed, and that's when plural marriage has been allowed. There are a couple of scriptural reasons that are given. One is as a restoration. That one's not explained. There's no elaboration on why plural marriage has to be restored. But another one is to create families, to bring more spirits here. Jacob in the Book of Mormon says that, and Doctrine and Covenants section 132 says it in a different way. And the one that is the most elaborated in section 132 of the Doctrine and Covenants, which is the revelation on marriage, both eternal marriage and plural marriage. The one that's most elaborated there, the reason, is as an Abrahamic sacrifice and an Abrahamic test.
Yeah.
I did this to prove you all as I did Abraham, that revelation says. And the whole logic of that revelation, the rationale internal to it is Abrahamic. I commanded Abraham to offer Isaac. That was completely strange, right? Absurd, awful. And that's sort of the point the Lord is saying there. Sometimes, once in a while, I do this. And the challenge is for Emma, Joseph, me, to decide whether I trust that God or not. Can I trust and love the God of Abraham? Is the question I'm being asked by section 132.
That's an interesting framing of that.
Yeah, it's a hard question.
Yeah.
It's not a simple or trite question, and I get frustrated at people who think it should be, as if that's an easy thing. Way back in 1999, I remember a sacrament meeting, and a fellow stood up and started teaching and just assumed a bunch of things about plural marriage and about how it would be in the eternities. He didn't know what he was talking about. And it was offensive, it was hurtful, it was painful. And I think plural marriage is probably the most painful doctrine of the church still. The church has done quite a bit of research on that. And just from my own experience, it is difficult. Some of the research shows that there's a difference in gender. I don't mean to overgeneralize it, but it's common for women to be very worried about whether they'll have to be plurally married to be exalted. And it's common for men to wonder if they can trust Joseph Smith. And I know that women sometimes feel that same way as well, but it's a serious issue to which we don't have full and complete answers. I believe that's intentional. The Lord in the last verse of section 132 says, I have more to tell you about this, but let this suffice for the present. That is Abrahamic, right? If you tell everything about an Abrahamic test at the beginning, you undermine your Abrahamic test. So this will not be a satisfying answer to many people, but for me, I'm I'm working on being able to trust and love the God of Abraham, who asks extremely difficult things of people he loves very much, and promises them compensation as much as the sand of the sea and the stars in the heavens.
This is where I start crying. Wow.
Thank you, Stephen, for that. And so along, maybe to wrap this up, is there, what are some resources that you would, because I know this is in the information age where we have all this information and we really don't know very much. What are some resources that you would recommend that people look to maybe help in this Abrahamic journey to learn to love the God? I love how you say that. To learn to love the God of Abraham. Are there some resources that you find to be extremely useful?
Well, scriptures, and prayer, right? If we're going to learn to love the God of Abraham, we have to feel his love for us. We have to have experiences with him personally. And nothing can create that outside of our quest. And people who are suffering from depression or other things can be very, very difficult to feel the love that comes from God. Not that it's not there, but feeling it, knowing it is a difficult thing. So there's no simple or magic answer, but certainly prayer. And I don't mean trite or rote prayer. I mean heartfelt, prostrate, Garden of Gethsemane kind of prayer, pouring your heart out. If you find it hard to love or trust the God of Abraham, tell him that. The God of Abraham is the God of Hagar, too. Hagar is the handmaid, the Egyptian slave girl who gets sent away, right? Where is God in all this? And the book of Genesis teaches us that the same God who promised the patriarchs all of the great blessings visited Hagar in her worst and lowest moment and rescued her and blessed her with posterity, and this posterity. That is true about the God of Abraham, right? He knows who Hagar is. He knows what her terrible circumstances are, and he comes to her rescue when no one else can or does. Wow. And so we can trust that. We can put our trust, or we can will ourselves to put our trust in the God of Abraham and throw ourselves on him, and we will not be disappointed. He'll support us. Jesus Christ is the God of Abraham. He's the God of the whole earth, as he told the Book of Mormon people when he descended out of heaven. So foremost, it's just yearning for that God. And if we'll do that, he will come to us. He'll respond to us. The scriptures are the most powerful thing we can do, I think, outside of prayer. And of all those scriptures, the Book of Mormon is the most foundational one. If it's true, the others are true. If it's not true, then I don't have a whole lot of confidence in the others either. But it is true. The Book of Mormon is true. It's the keystone. And to gain a testimony of that book and to be nourished by that book is vital. And then beyond that, let's minister to people and be ministered to by people. We can't control the second one. We just trust God and hope he'll send us people to minister to us when we need it. But we can control how we serve other people, how we minister to people. There are a lot of people who need our help, and we can be led to them and do small things that for them will be big if we're sensitive to what the Lord is inspiring us to do.
I feel like this conversation is that.
Well, I'm sitting here thinking about, okay, so I asked this question that all of us have wrestled with, and I like how you delineated sometimes it can be a little more gender
sensitive.
The pain is different oftentimes depending on whether you approach this from a specific gender, and then your answer is love God, love others. Your answer really centered on those two great commandments. And I'm sitting here thinking about President Nelson, like, let God prevail in your life. Well, if you're going to let God prevail, you're going to do godly things. You're going to do things that reflect him, which is help other people and repent and pray for help and pray for strength. And I love those Gethsemane type prayer. And then also hear him, which is this idea of really getting the God for you in your own heart and being able to see that reflected in Abraham. I've never noticed that in Hagar. And I will never teach that story the same now because of this. I never noticed it.
She's a revelator, and she's a daughter of God. And when no one else, when her family kicks her out, God rescues her.
And she's a mother of an entire nation,
Right.
of a religion right now.
A covenant,
A covenant
woman.
keeping, yes. So I want to just maybe wrap up this topic specific question with a discussion around the temple and priesthood, and I feel the prompting to include in there Mother in Heaven. And
Wonderful.
Any of your thoughts regarding, to me, they're very all intertwined. And so, but whatever the Spirit is feeling for you, because I do feel like I don't want to use up the time to give the examples of why any of those three have become maybe stumbling blocks or distractions.
Yeah. Well, President Oaks taught that our theology begins with heavenly parents, and our highest aspiration is to become like them. That's beautiful. That's the restored gospel in its fullness, in a nutshell. And I'm grateful for that. There's no other church in the world that teaches that we have heavenly parents. Believers in Christ's second appearing, Shakers, had that idea. There are not many of them left, if there are any. And we are the last ones that teach that we have a mother in heaven who is a goddess, the queen of heaven, the spouse of our Father in heaven. We are the children of heavenly parents. Our families are modeled on theirs. And our aspiration and our potential is to become like them, right? We have that capacity. And the restored gospel teaches us that we are natural men and women who are enemies to God because of the fall, who can yield to the Holy Spirit and become saints through the atonement of Jesus Christ until we become like our heavenly parents. This is the greatest good news I can imagine.
Yeah.
And it leads us through the temple. The way we get there is to make and keep covenants. The most important thing we will ever do, ever in our life, is to make and keep covenants. And it can be difficult to do. The covenants are hard to keep. And there are all kinds of contexts and freight, baggage maybe, that make temple for some people very difficult. Priesthood, right? If I'm a woman, is there any role in priesthood for me? I've heard of women, including very recently, who skipped over Section 84, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Come Follow Me, because it was about priesthood. And I want to shout from the housetops that revelation is about the blessing everyone who wants to regain God's presence needs, which is an endowment of priesthood power. And as you know well, President Nelson has taught the sisters recently that if they are endowed with priesthood power and somebody says to them, "I'm sorry you don't have the priesthood in your home," just politely say, "Oh, I do. I do. I'm endowed with priesthood power." So we can be better at explaining priesthood the way Joseph Smith did. Joseph Smith prepared sisters for a priesthood endowment of power. He didn't ordain sisters to priesthood office. But that idea of, do sisters hold priesthood, that's kind of a new way of talking about it, or not. I mean, I wish we could kind of throw that question out and just say, can sisters be endowed with priesthood power? Absolutely. How long have they been? Since 1843.
Do they have access to priesthood power?
Indeed
Absolutely.
they do. Right. As our current prophet has taught, and that's not a new thing. President Joseph Smith taught that. President Oaks has been teaching it. President Ballard's been teaching it. It didn't get invented for our time. It got restored through Joseph Smith the prophet. And sisters and brothers can be sealed together by the power of the holy priesthood. There's an order of the priesthood, Section 131 says, of the Doctrine and Covenants, and it is being sealed in the new and everlasting covenant of marriage. That's an order of the priesthood. And you don't get into it singly. So we are being divided when what our heavenly parents want for us is to be empowered and unified. And men sometimes say stupid things, right? Men sometimes are jerks and fools, and sometimes that has driven wedges. But I hope that doesn't cloud anybody's view of the glorious restoration of the fullness of the gospel, which exalts women as well as men in the highest and holiest possible way. You can't do better than become like your mother in heaven.
That's such a great, beautiful answer. I think when we discussed section 84, we talked about it being not gender specific. Yeah. And your answer was beautiful. And if I could shake my head more emphatically, I would have, without distracting on camera.
I know, and that's what's interesting. I had someone, a fellow colleague, a seminary teacher, just say, go through section 84 and look for priesthood offices in there. I'm like, oh, okay, that'll be easy. I'm like, wait, they're not. They're not. It's a totally different, or not even different. It's well beyond that discussion. And so, thank you. I love that Queen of Heaven.
I know.
You said right there at the beginning. Let's see. So as we finish up here, maybe we might have one or two more questions from you or for you. But one of them that I'm really interested in is, so you specialize in understanding, analyzing, and drawing meaning from historical events from the past. I mean, that's a lot of what you've done in your scholarship and so on. And so the question that I have is, how has that historical perspective helped you face the future with faith? How has it impacted the way that you look forward?
Great question. Studying history teaches you to expect change over time. Historians don't think things have always been this way. Historians are typically not fundamentalists. Fundamentalists think there's a sort of pristine, perfect past that we have to get back to, and they're afraid of getting away from it. They're afraid of any change. Historians, studying history teaches you it's all about change. History, in one way, is a study of change over time. So the church has changed over time from the beginning. It's going to continue to change. I expect that. So that's one of the assets of studying history.
It's very expansive.
Indeed.
Yeah. Gosh, what a blessing, because you just see evidence. It's a reality. It has to be. So if it does stay the same, then that's where you start to question things, is when it's too rigid.
Yeah, we have folks who break off from the church who pursue fundamentalist paths and agendas, and their way of thinking or orienting themselves is to always get back to the way things were when they were perfect. Well, I've never thought of things as a perfect past. I'm looking forward to the restoration of fullness. There are a couple places in the Doctrine and Covenants where the Lord says, I'm going to tell you things in the latter days I've never told before. I'm going to give you things I've never given before. We're looking forward to more, not going back to a perfect past. I think there are a lot of Latter-day Saints who misunderstand the Joseph Smith translation of the Bible in this very way. They think that he was putting the Bible back to its perfect original. No, he wasn't. He never thought of that as his project. He did recover some things that were lost, but he did so much more than that. The Joseph Smith translation of the Bible is like the restoration of the gospel. There's a lot more. There's fullness, there's change, there's things that are new, things that are different. And so long as we're led by the Savior through his prophets, that's all good. We don't have to be worried about going back to live the united order the way they did in 1832. We're never going to do that, ever. We're going to go forward into the future and be led as current circumstances require.
I think our mutual friend Anthony Sweat was talking about the translation, the Joseph Smith translation, that we also mistakenly assume that what didn't get addressed was that either a signal he ran out of time or that everything was fine with those sections. And once again, it goes back to your initial comment for us as we started this conversation, that what do we think we know by what we think we know? And really, we don't know anything. It's just clarity on the areas. He didn't run out of time. It was where the Lord directed him, and we're going to learn more in the future. So I love that. In closing, we really started season 2 on Real Talk with a personal invitation, a why, to have viewers and ourselves included to have our own Sacred Grove experiences. And, we haven't really delved deeply into the trigger, I think, in the past of multiple accounts of the first vision. But I think for me, it says to me that one of the prophet Joseph's biggest whys was that he wasn't saying, hey, listen, I want you to learn what happened to me, and that's cool. He wanted to keep inviting to have our own experience, to take what he had experienced and have that personally. what has happened in your life that you could maybe share for those that are like, I'm not having those Sacred Grove experiences in my life. The first vision feels like it happened to a prophet, and I'm so far from that. What do you feel?
Well, I agree with
share?
them, right? I've never had a Sacred Grove experience. If by that we mean the Father and the Son appear to me. I've had a few, I can count on one hand, really formative revelations. I knelt at my bedside after my first year of college, having read the Book of Mormon, and asked a simple prayer to know if it was true. And I got a simple answer. That was a phrase in my mind, you already know it's true, and a feeling of affirmation of that was powerful and that I've never wanted to get rid of or deny. I could not, in good conscience, and I'm not even sure I'm capable of denying the Book of Mormon as a result of that experience. It's not because I know there are sophisticated Hebrew poetry structures in it. That's cool, but that's not why I know it's true or why it changes my life. So that, I was praying once in front of the Hinckley building at BYU, not kneeling on the ground there, but just waiting for a ride and praying and sort of telling the Lord why he was wrong about how I thought he was handling one of my children. And I got the
I've had that same prayer. Hey, how did Stephen know? Have you been in my house?
Congregations are raising their hands right now.
Wow, it occurs to me that he might get frustrated with us from time to time. But if he hears that prayer a million times a day, he rebuked me soundly and made sure I knew that he loves this child of mine more than I can fathom, and that he has their back. And I have banked on that ever since. It's been really wonderful to know that. So I would say that most of my most memorable revelations are sort of that sharp, don't you think I know what I'm doing kind of thing. And again, I don't have that experience very often. Mostly I'll wake up in the morning with some kind of clear thinking. And Joseph Smith described this saying, when you feel pure intelligence, then act on it, and you'll see that it'll be realized that day or soon. So
that's a gem.
Yeah, that's how it works for me. When I get these ideas that I realize are not my normal cloudy, convoluted thinking, I act on them, and they come to pass. They're the Lord's revelations to me. So I'm like this person in your audience who says, my life is 99% mundane, no revelation, no great earth-shattering stuff, just day-to-day, plodding along, not always loving everything about going to church and the church culture, and right, it gets heavy, and sometimes, you wish you could sort of take a vacation from it. But realizing then, my life is directed by covenants. Covenants, when in the day-to-day mundane part of my life, where I'm not having any angels talk to me, what makes me get up in the morning and read my scriptures? Covenants. What makes me get on my knees and pray? Not perfectly? Covenants. What makes me repent relentlessly? Covenants. So more than first vision experiences, which are rare, even for Joseph Smith, covenants. And the relentless plodding effort to keep covenants is my life. And I think that's probably how it is for most of us.
That was an amazing and wonderful answer. And I feel so grateful that we've had this conversation, and you've answered prayers for me personally.
And so validating in what you said there, because sometimes you think you're the goofy one, you're the weird one, and we're not. Oh. And so I appreciate that Zion-like vulnerability to just say, a lot of us have felt that way. I felt similar feelings, and so thank you for that validation.
Thank you.
Well, I think, should we wrap up there? Well, we'd like to thank you for joining us on this episode of Real Talk Friends with Professor Stephen Harper. And we're so grateful for all that he's done. And from a personal note, he's called in a lot of times to train seminary and institute teachers through the summer on church history and doctrine. And so I've been able to enjoy his teaching from a distance, but not too much of a distance. And so he has really blessed my life. Those of you who have the book that I wrote about with Come Follow Me Through the Doctrine and Covenants, you'll notice a lot of my citations come from making sense of the Doctrine and Covenants that you wrote back, I think, in 2008.
Yeah.
And has
Thank
been
you for that, by the way.
a tremendous blessing. So even if you don't have it, go get it now. You'll need it for the next few sections before the year is over. It's written beautifully, simply, but also with a lot of depth and content. So anyway, so we're really grateful, Stephen, that you chose to come on and share your experiences, your faith, your vulnerabilities. And we'd like to thank you again, and thank you for joining us on Real Talk Friends. You guys, please like and subscribe and click the bell.
Like and subscribe.
What did I say?
You did it. It was
Like
perfect.
and subscribe
That was so perfect.
and click the bell. Just do it.